All right, thank you, everybody. There's good news and bad news. The bad news is we're in the dreaded time slot. It's long enough after lunch that you guys are probably getting a little sleepy, and we're the only ones standing between you and the coffee break. The good news is this is a riveting topic, and we're going to keep you awake. So thank you very much for staying and hanging around and coming to see us talk. So just a little bit of the lay of the land. How many of you guys are from small companies? Let's just say 50 or less. All right, how about more than 50? And some of you didn't raise your hand, which means you're not paying attention yet. So 50, more than 50, or not in any company at all? Small company, all right, sounds good. Any solo entrepreneurs in the audience? All right, couple, more power to you. We were solo entrepreneurs a few times over, and now we've got a great team in front of us. So thank you, Julie, for the great intro, and we'll dive right in here. So let Di talk a little bit about her background, and I'll talk a little bit about mine, but won't bore you too much.
Yeah, we can make the intro short, but I just wanted to talk about my role at Ascendle. So as president, for those of you who might be in software development and use Scrum, I liken my role to the Scrum Master for the organization. So I'm very focused on making sure the mechanics work, and whatever framework or process or methodology we're using to run the business, it's on me to make sure that we stick with it. So I'll be talking a lot about more the execution of OKRs and how to make it work in your company. And I'll hand it back to my visionary, Dave.
Anybody familiar with Traction, entrepreneurial operating system? A couple of guys. So the folks that created this system were brilliant, because what they realized is that founders have an issue, which is they're both a huge benefit to the company and a big problem. So the structure with Traction and EOS is that there's a visionary and an integrator, and everybody works for the integrator. So it protects the company from the founder, me, but doesn't let the founder kind of drift off into the distance. And so the role is called visionary. So I'm the big picture guy. Di's the one that needs to figure it all out. So I'm going to talk about the big picture stuff, and then she's going to talk about how to actually do it. So you guys ever feel like, I'm just going to skip that over, ever feel like this in your company, right? When we brainstormed this presentation, I said, well, what about like a drawn and quartered image? And Di said, that's probably not appropriate for a mixed company. So this is what we came up with. So we're always getting pulled in different directions. What is it that we need to focus on and drive forward? And of course, I think all of us, no matter what size company, we're trying to do more with less. So unless we actually focus the power of the sun on what's most important, we're not going to get anything done. And the good news is that we have this construct, OKRs, which will help you do that. And we've been using OKRs for a while now, really have made a big difference in our company, and we'll get into the details. So as Steve Jobs said, innovation is saying no to 1,000 things. And that is always our challenge. The solo entrepreneur, there's one of us, right? So I need to say no to a lot more than if I have a team. But even when I do have a team, even if I'm a $100 million company, like a lot of our clients, they still have to say no to a lot of things. Even if they have tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, they still need to figure out, how do I actually generate a profit? So that's what OKRs are all about. And it battles these challenges. So it used to be, set the strategy for the year, execute. And then we'll come back next year and we'll talk about it again. That doesn't work anymore. We need to be more resilient. Revisit goals, constantly adjust, stay in tune, and again, we need to do more with less. So what exactly are OKRs? How many people are familiar with OKRs, at least have heard of them? Okay. How many are using them in their company? All right, a few of you. Awesome. So we're going to hit you guys up at the end. I'm going to have you guys come up here and explain how just kidding, but I might hit you up for some questions. But seriously, feel free to add any tips and tricks that we might not mention. Just yell it out and we'll repeat it for the audience. So objectives and key results. John Doerr, he's sort of the father of OKRs. He wrote a book called Measure What Matters. We'll give you a slide on that at the end. By the way, if you guys want these slides, we'll have QR codes at the end. Just connect with us on LinkedIn, and we'll be more than happy to send the slides along. So, what are objectives? Two parts to objectives and key results. First, the objectives. The objectives are the big picture. I like this one. So they tend to be qualitative, ambitious. So it's not, increase sales by 0.5%. It might be, we're going to increase sales by 15%. Significant and inspirational. So, and this is a bit of an art. We've, again, been using OKRs for a while. It can be difficult to come up with good objectives because how do we both make them qualitative, ambitious, and inspirational as opposed to, oh my God, how are we ever going to do that, right? So how do we strike that balance between those extremes? And this gets into focusing the power of the sun. By setting these objectives, and we'll talk a little bit more about the structure of, well, how many objectives do I have? Who sets them, when? I'll be getting into those mechanics. But we can focus our efforts on what's going to be high impact. And it's not perfect. Things are going to change over time. So we'll set those objectives, we'll revisit them, probably set some new objectives, et cetera, et cetera.
Dave, if I could interject right there. I think
go ahead.
one thing that has come up at our company recently was employees saying, well, I don't know that I can just have the North Star for our company roll off my tongue. Can we be better about all getting on the same page and understanding what our North Star is? So I think if you are setting OKRs for the first time, thinking about, well, what is our North Star and how can we put that in an objective that every team member can look at that objective and the key results and say, I get it, I understand what that objective means, and I can get behind it. So it should have a lot of impact, and it should be clear right away what the value is, whether it's a value to the organization, value to your customers, clear, concise, impactful, and again, less is more, right? The more concise and clear it is, the better.
So in our day jobs, we work with software leaders, those in software organizations, and what we do is we help them accelerate revenue. So they're building software that's tied to revenue. We help them get more of that faster. And we like to ask them, if you could only have one thing this quarter, what would it be? And they say, I can't have more than one? No, just one thing. And that helps them with this sort of exercise. So we do the same sort of exercise with our clients. For them, it's what are we going to be doing with this software product? For you, it'll be what are you doing with your company? So a few examples. Improve user experience on Google Search, increase member engagement on the platform, expand podcast listeners by 30%, and one that we can probably all identify with, whether we're a one-person show or a larger company, new bookings and pipeline in Q4. So these are the high-level objectives. We'll get into the key results that tie into a couple of these in a moment. So as Peter Drucker famously said, what gets measured gets managed, and that ties now into the key results, whereas this is where the rubber meets the road. So instead of qualitative, the big picture guy, the big picture guys like me like, now we're getting into specific numbers. They're measurable. They're outcome-based and time-bound. Anyone use SMART goals? Kind of like SMART goals, right? So it's sort of the same technique, but they're tying directly back to that objective. And more important, you can use this to measure your progress. So as you're moving along during the quarter or the year, you can say, okay, well, this is our key result. Because we said we were going to do this number of these, I can see how far I'm getting along with that.
If I could add something to
go
that
ahead.
as well. I think one thing, thinking about our journey and when we adopted EOS, which has this idea of rocks, which is also kind of your big meaty initiatives only 3 to 7 per quarter that you focus on. With the EOS construct, it was they're done or not done. There was nothing in between. So you could get 95% done with your rock for that quarter or your initiative. And when we do our reflection, it was like, done or not done? It's not done. I never got it peer reviewed, or I never quite got it into the right spot in our wiki. So what I like about the OKR approach is that we actually set up a kind of a continuum of a scale. So let's say we wanted 100% of our engineers trained on test-driven development by the end of the quarter, and maybe we did get 90%. Well, we can see that, and we track the numbers in a scale of 1 to 10. We track our numbers, and then we can celebrate our achievements. And we can, every week when we check in, we can see that number go up and up. So it's not binary because, I mean, life is not binary, right? It's not just yes or no. So I think that was a really big difference when we adopted the OKR approach.
Absolutely. All right, so a few examples of what key results look like, and we've tied them back to some of the objectives that we talked about. So for Google's objective, key result 1, and by the way, this is not a wall of text. We're not going to have 23 key results for each objective. The guidance is 3 to 5, right, Di? Mm-hmm. So 3 to 5, we like the 3 more than the 5. Nice, tight, and driving focus. So first one, reduce the annual average page load. Time by 20%, increase the number of daily active users, user satisfaction, et cetera. LinkedIn, weekly active users, content shares, increase the number of messages. So the time aspect isn't shown here, but for example, the objective would have a time outcome related to it, and then these key results are within that time. Notice how they're all measurable. So they're all numbers based. In some companies, they might say, I want to bring the number from here to here. So they'll have a baseline associated with that key result. More examples from Spotify, increasing the podcast listeners, launching new podcast series, achieving an increase in ad revenue, and then finally, the ones that apply to, the one that applies to all of us, the new bookings. We want to do some training for the sales folks, add new pipeline, close new bookings.
So I think you may be looking at it and saying, you told me that the key results were the how, but it says, add new pipeline. That's not really telling me how, right? So it's the how you're going to get there that's measurable, but of course there's a lot of work to do to actually break down the key result. So we would typically have one person accountable for each key result. That doesn't mean that they have to do all the work for the key result, but you have that accountability to make sure that they're driving it and getting it done, and then they can bring in as many team members or departments as necessary to get the key result done. But the key thing for the accountability factor is also if it gets off track, they're responsible for getting it back on track. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about cadence and measuring.
And what's exciting about these is that they're typically set at multiple levels in the organization. We're going to be talking just at the high level today, but typically company-wide objective key results, just one objective over a certain time frame and the key results that we want to drive those. And then the individual departments are going to set their own OKRs that then push against that overall OKR, and then it kind of keeps going down and down throughout the organization. So what's really nice about that, and Di will be talking a little bit more about this, is that it helps drive the focus of everybody in the right direction, A, and B, it actually solves for the problem that we hear all the time in all of our clients, which is the individual contributor saying, I don't really know what the plan is. They don't understand how what they're doing each day is helping to move the company forward. And if you don't have everybody aligned and pushing in the same direction, you're not going to get to the destination that you otherwise could. So it seems really simple on the surface. A little sentence, a few bullets, but when you expand it throughout the entire organization, Now, all of a sudden, everyone's pushing that same direction on the wheel. So with that, I'm going to hand things over to Di, and she's going to get into the how.
Sure. So we are firm believers in servant leadership, that the people, the boots on the ground, are the closest to the problem and are therefore the best suited to solve a problem. But when rolling out an objective or an initiative like this, it really needs to come from the top down. I think it needs to be driven initially from the top down, and as time goes on, less and less so. But I think a key to starting off is to get the senior leadership team on board, get alignment there, and be very visible about your commitment to this initiative, and then champion the framework continuously. Don't talk about it a lot the first quarter you do it and then stop talking about it so much. It really needs to be driven from the top down. And then start out with just the leadership team trying on the OKRs for size. We've done it, we did it slowly in our organization, where the senior leadership team did it for several quarters before bringing on the rest of the organization. If you do nothing else after listening to this presentation, if you decide not to adopt OKRs, at least consider, what cadence are we communicating at? So establish a cadence of communication at your organization. For OKRs, we recommend doing quarterly OKRs. We have seen examples. There's a kind of a famous YouTube example of getting to 1 billion hours of screen time. Well, it was a 4-year objective. I think for most of us, that is way too long, right? We don't know where we'll be in 4 years. So start with quarterly, but then also set up a weekly cadence where you're reviewing the scorecard, we call it a scorecard, but where you're reviewing the key results and how you're tracking against them, identifying where they get off track. And also do a mid-quarter check-in, so you can just, after a month or so has gone by, just take a step back. How are these OKRs? Are we still feeling like they make sense? You're not going to be perfect at this initially, so get a little bit of a gut check. And then, again, be very quick to raise your hand and say, I think this key result is off track. Let's all talk about it and get it back on track. So at our company, in terms of cadence, we do an entire day-long quarterly meeting, and in fact, we just had ours yesterday. And I think by the end of the day, I was thinking, we really need 2 days. We had so much to talk about, because it's a chance for us to get out of the weeds and really elevate ourselves and talk about strategy. So doing that quarterly for the leadership team, and then all of the departments as well, set up a quarterly cadence where they're getting themselves out of the weeds, talking about their OKRs to help move the company OKR along. Training, adoption, and empowerment. Another lesson that we've learned over the years. We'll get all excited as a leadership team about a new tool or a new framework, a way we're going to do something, and we just assume that our excitement is going to permeate and everybody is going to feel the same way. And we learned our lesson. We rolled out an HR tool for one-on-ones. Like, this is amazing. This is what we've been looking for. This is going to make our one-on-ones and our whole professional development plans amazing. And as weeks and months went by, we started to hear that people didn't like it or didn't get it. So we said, okay, we need to actually think about the rollout. So doing training, adding the different layers of the organization slowly, maybe one at a time, until you actually get down to the individual level, because it is intended to be everyone in the company has an OKR that they can translate back to the company objective and say, I understand the work that I do and how the work that I do every day translates back to that objective. And then we'll say this a lot, you can't say it enough, conveying your vision and why. I think it's the book Traction that says you need to tell people things 7 times before it really sinks in. So talk about your vision and why at every all-hands meeting, smaller gatherings at the department level, talk about it all the time. And then measure and monitor. Have a tool that everyone has access to. So transparency is a big piece of this, and have everybody's OKR, not just the leadership team, not just your department, have everybody in the organization able to see everybody's OKR so they can see how all the pieces fit together. And it doesn't have to be a fancy tool. We do use a tool that's, again, specific to running EOS, and we have other things in it as well as our OKRs, but you can also use Excel. Just the important thing is to make sure that it's accessible and visible for everyone. And then we love our retrospectives, right? We're always trying to get better, always continuously learning, always trying to get better. So take the time to review, reflect, and celebrate. Maybe you only, were able to move the needle a little bit on one of your key results. Maybe some made it all the way up to the top in the green. But celebrate, take the time to celebrate your successes and also understand how you could do better. And, I always think that when we started setting OKRs for the first time, it's like the first pancake. Sure, it was edible, and it came out okay, but it looked a little funny, and the subsequent pancakes are always way better, right? So when you first start setting your OKRs, it might be like that first pancake. And then rinse and repeat. Make sure you stay on that cadence. Don't let anything, not even your biggest client, we don't let anything change the date of our quarterly meetings and our annual. We actually go away for 2 days annually, get out of the office. Don't let anything change it. Weekly meetings too. You shouldn't miss these meetings. They're incredibly important to running your company. We say the only reason you can miss it is vacation or death, which is a little morbid.
It is a little morbid. That's really important. We talk about working on the company versus working in the company. Most of us, particularly in smaller companies, spend all of our time working in the company. So the way that we use these meetings is to just force ourselves to take a step back and work on the company. So we're not going to be on that hamster wheel forever. We're actually going to be able to build toward our goals and grow. It's really tough to do that when you're working in the company 100% of the time.
Yeah. All right, so you may be thinking, okay, I have a lot of things vying for my time. The image with the hair being pulled.
I can't do that.
Are they really going to be worth the time and effort? Well, we believe they are. So in John Doerr's book, he talks about the superpowers that will be bestowed upon you when you use OKRs. So they allow you to focus and commit to priorities, and they also allow you to say no to things, which is really important. I think the full part of that Steve Jobs quote, he actually says, I'm almost as proud of the things I said no to as I am about the things we said yes to. Align and connect for teamwork. That's, again, the visibility and transparency and being able to see how my OKR fits in. It also, by making it visible to the entire organization, you may have interdependencies between departments or between people, so it allows you to clearly see where you need to work together for teamwork. Tracking for accountability, again, making it so transparent and visible that you can quickly see when you're not moving the needle and can talk about it and be accountable to that number. It's a number, right? The key result is measurable, so it's not subjective, and you can tell when it's moving along. And then stretch for amazing. The more you do it, the more you will start to really think about, well, how can we stretch and how can we be more innovative and adapt to what's happening in the marketplace. Anything to add there, Dave?
No, like I said, we've experienced it. We're serial entrepreneurs, getting pulled in multiple directions. Wish I could do the hair thing, but it's just not going to work for me today. Focusing the power of the sun and revisiting it and striking that balance between sticking to it and being resilient. So we really like that quarter cadence. Again, if you're a huge multinational conglomerate, maybe you can set a 4-year goal, but for most of us, focusing on the here and now is going to be much better. Maybe quarterly, get some practice, and then get into annual. You could go beyond that, but just start doing it, and like Di said, give it a shot. It's worked really well for us.
All right. Suggested reading, really recommend reading the book. And then there's also whatmatters.com website, which is a wealth of information. There are training videos, there are a whole bunch of examples, other stories, true stories. And yeah, I spent actually quite a bit of time on the website preparing for this presentation.